Today I want to show a few of the enemy AI that I did with behavioral trees. On the left side, those are skeletons that will try to pathfind and move toward you and then try to attack you in melee range. The ghosts are gonna just move in a straight line through the walls, and the mages here are trying to get in line of sight and then shooting a projectile at you. As you can see, the different enemies have a bit of a different behavior, and then when they are in range, those ones try to attack you, and the same with the others. Try to clear those. Taking a lot of damage here. And here there is a new enemy, the totem, which is basically a static enemy that shoots projectile in a cross. I will show in a second the logic in code, but essentially I decided to implement behavioral trees using just pure C# and not using, I think, the new Unity from Unity 5. There is a way to visually create behavioral trees. It's just a way to structure, the logic for the enemy in a very easy way to create new behavior, chain them together, and it just gives the enemy almost a flowchart for decision making. So, if they are not in range, they try to move toward you. If they are in range, they attack you. And also those nodes are fairly isolated. The state are inside the node, and the enemy itself can make all the decision based on the model and the data they have access to on how to behave. So an example of the behavioral tree for the ghost enemy, I will show in a second, the implementation on the specific nodes, but it's basically every time there is a new enemy, it's just a combination of those various pieces. This selector you can look at like an OR action where it tries to do this thing, and if this fails, it moves to the next one and it tries to do the next one. So in this case, it tries to do first the sequence. The sequence is more of an AND, so all the nodes need to execute. They need to execute returning success, so the next one can run, and this returns success only if all of those return success. So if the sequence starts with the player not being in range, this return failure, and the next action is the move phasing action where it tries to move toward the enemy. If the player is in range, then the base melee attack is performed, and the action in that case, if the melee is performed, returns true. So this is the action that was executed, and the selection start again. So we check again if the player is in range, we try to attack again, otherwise we phase move. And this is implementation of the behavioral tree node. Every node is just implementing execute, which can return failure, success, or running. In this case, we check if we are close enough to the player. In this case, we return success. Otherwise, we return running. So we stay inside this node because this node at every frame just moves toward the player. There is nothing else that the ghost can do if we are far away from the player. So we just try to get closer to the player. Is in player range, as it's very easy. We just check if we are close enough to the player. In this case, we succeed. Otherwise, it's a failure. And this is just trying to perform a melee attack with the timer for the attack, which is stored internally to the node. In the enemy factory, every time we try to create an enemy, we also create the behavior tree corresponding to what is configured. So at the moment, I just have 4 behavior, totem, basic melee, and basic ranged. So a different behavioral tree is created based on the type configured. The enemy is set with this behavioral tree, and the context is basically what it's the access to the model that the enemy and the behavioral tree can have. So for example, the enemy has a reference to the enemy itself, because the enemy has an enemy config. It's aware of its health pool and whatever it needs, and it also have a reference to the active map. The active map contains information about the walls, information of where the player is, so the enemy and the AI can navigate through the active map. And probably the totem is the easiest of all enemies, because the AI is basically just trying to, the enemy does not move, it just attack with projectile in across every attack timer. So this is just the behavioral tree where it returns running when the attack is charging, and then you just create 4 projectile in across and return success. And those are then reusable if there is another enemy that just shoot, in this case, different projectile, because the projectile config is configured in the enemy config. We can reuse this behavior. And here on the right side, where I currently have to configure the enemy, the behavior is just a selector where we can pick the one that we have defined. So for example, the mage has the base ranged, which use as a projectile wherever it's configured. So we can have different enemies that shoot different projectile, but use the same behavior. In this case, in the config of the projectile, we have the sprite and some of the configuration for the projectile itself. Ghost projectile is what the totem use, so the projectile can just go through the wall. If you made it to the end, thank you very much. Let me know what type of devlogs, what information about the process of making this game is more interesting to you, and I will try to make a video covering those topics.